My 11-year-old asked me if he could download a compound interest calculator. Man, was that a special day in this house, Dougals. Do you get the joke?
Whoa.
Do you get the joke?
No.
You don't. He's
Say
already
more.
thinking about growing wealth.
That's
This
not a
calculator.
joke, though. What's the joke?
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Dougals, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Mr. Skippy, send me a dream.
What's happening right now?
I'm serenading you to start things off. Get things off on a good foot.
A good
A
foot?
good food.
I'm gonna get some things off on a good foot by pitching you two stocks that I think are up your alley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is subscriber level stuff.
I mean, I think it is. I'm not telling. I haven't even texted my closest friends about these.
Okay. All right. Let's bring
Here's
it.
how much I like this. Well, first of all, they're not value stocks.
Okay.
Not at all. They're in a depressed industry, and I like them.
Like an industry that is depressed
Yeah.
or a depressing industry. Okay.
Maybe both. I mean, those things
Oh.
often go together.
All right. Send it.
Okay, so
Both of them. But both of them same industry?
same industry.
Oh, I don't like that, but keep going. If you are joining right now, and it's the beginning of the show, so you are joining right now, what we just did was we discussed a couple potentially hot stock recommendations for folks for our premium subscribers. Now we're going back into the weekly standard, but still awesome show that we have in store for
so
y'all
awesome.
today.
So awesome.
Speaking of awesome, should we start off with some listener mail?
Listener mail is always awesome.
Hit it.
They fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. Fight, 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 fight. The Skippy and Douglas Show.
Okay, I'm gonna start off by saying this right here. What hit me with this is kind of buck wild. So thank you, Jared, for sending this listener mail in. And Jared sends us this listener mail, and it came in the same day that I started reading a book that this listener mail is about. What are the odds? This book is almost 30 years old.
Wait.
So-
So because the listener mail is interesting, and it's about am I saying this right? The Strauss-Howe generation theory.
Sure. The book is
And-
called The Fourth Turning.
Okay, the book is called The Fourth Turning. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna be quiet over here because I want to hear about the book, and then I'll give you my thoughts on this.
So I'm probably about a third of the way, 40% of the way through this book. But when this came through, there must have been something in the ether that both lifted it up some time ago to make me pick it up and to make Jared send it over. But it was kind of interesting. So here's the deal. This is one of those, I would say, at a minimum and potentially maximum, depending on your own viewpoint, but at a minimum, intellectually curious type theories. The authors, of course, take that intellectual curiosity and blow it out into like fact, right?
Yeah.
That is what they've established it in. The book is at a minimum 2 times as long as it needs to be. Let me just throw that out there. But
Boo.
yet and still,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. The book's called The Fourth Turning. What Jared sent over was not a recommendation for the book, but he sent over this YouTube video where someone is summarizing the core point of the book in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, but let me try and explain the YouTube video and maybe explain
Oh.
the book.
Yeah.
You take an 80-year cycle, which is roughly a generation. You divide that
A
into 4
seculum.
parts.
A seculum.
No one cares. Divide that into 4 parts and say, like, there's kind of this waviness that happens as part of a generation where here's what it really reminded me of. This quote: hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Those 4 parts are kind of what this person describes as a 20-year cycle within a generation. All makes sense. You zoom out and you go like, people forget the lessons they learn over a generation, and then they have to relearn those lessons. That makes perfect sense because, unfortunately, your great grandfather probably died, and he's not telling you about the Great Depression anymore. So then you're bound to have the next Great Depression or the next war that happened 90 years back. All makes sense. The way this YouTube video goes, and it sounds like maybe what the book does, is gets a little too prescriptive in like claiming that that's 100% fact, and then
It's
being like, oh, what's happening in 2028? Watch out. And
it
I
is
don't
it
think
is saying it is saying to your point that this is what happens. It's not this is a general trend that you might pick up on. It is this is what happens, and it goes back centuries. Specifically, what the book ties into is it calls it the Anglo-American experience. So it discusses Europe and the US. It does not say that this is what happens elsewhere. I think they just haven't academically looked at that. But exactly what you stated, there are these periods of time, 80 years, which is roughly the lifetime of an individual. They split it into about 20-year cycles. And what they say, and I'll talk through what the turnings are. It's called the fourth turning, what each of the turnings are, those 20-year periods, and I'll talk through the generational archetypes that they lay out. I'm gonna hit this in brief because they go into it so many different examples. It is aggressive, maybe egregious, what they do. But here's what it is. So the four turnings are this. The first is the high. The high. So what that one is, that's when times are good. You have strong institutions. People are more collectivist. Everything feels real good. This is what, right? Strong times, strong times. People feel good about that. Then what comes after that is the awakening. So you have the high, then you have the awakening. This is when people start questioning those institutions. Is that institution really as strong as we thought? Right? So you start getting into more individualism. Then you get the unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
The unraveling is when the institutions get weakened because of all of like the questioning that just happened. There's more political fragmentation, more social fragmentation, and then you get crisis. That's the fourth one. So crisis, it doesn't have to, but a lot of times ends in a war.
Yes.
So this book was written in the late 90s. And to your point, what it was saying is in the US, it said, we are currently in the unraveling period of time. And if you look historically, in about a decade or so, the crisis should happen. And that will last about 20 years. So that would take you from the 2008 to 2028 time period.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give a couple more points?
Yeah,
or do you want to jump
yeah.
in? Okay. The other thing I'll summarize for you that ties into those four time periods, and this gets to the quote, like it hits the quote pretty strongly there, is there are four generational archetypes. And the way that they lay out is it's who was born in each of these periods. And so therefore, how were they raised? That's kind of how they lay out. And so the prophets, what they call the prophets, are people that were born during the high period. And so they grew up in this period of strong institutions, etc. Then you get, and it says it always follows the same trajectory. Then you get the nomads. The nomads are born during the awakening, right? So they're born during a time of social upheaval. Then you get the heroes. Heroes are born during the unraveling. Our current hero archetype would be millennials. That's the period. That's the unraveling time. So you get the heroes that are born during the unraveling, and then the artists are born during crisis. When Earth hang up in the air and they're like all free, whatever. So it goes back and it says, if you map these in 80-year periods, you can see the 1970s, all kinds of artists, right? 60s, 70s, you get all kinds of artists. You go back 80 years before that, in the late 19th century, all kinds of artists. So it just like maps out like that. And when the crisis, I think I'm getting this right, when the crisis happens, that's the time period where all four of the generational archetypes are like, what's the right way to say it? They're all kind of new. Like there is an overlap between the seculums, like at that point in time. So it's an interesting like set of theories, and looking at it historically, it's interesting. I can see your face and I love it. Go for
my
it.
pushback here is like even the YouTube video is like, yeah, it says, oh, the artists are being born right now and something bad's going to happen in 2028, or it implies it. But it also says like, ooh, look at all these artists in the 60s and 70s. And then it like mentions Kurt Cobain in the 90s as if he's not like an artist of
No,
similar.
there are no artists.
Yeah, like if the artists don't exist, in
No,
it seemed
it's
a
not
little
saying that
too
artists don't
blanket
exist. It's saying
statement-y
it's like a
to me.
generation. It's saying this is generally what the generation represents. I know I
And
hear
I
your
think
whole point.
anytime you make those generalizations, it gets into pretty, because I think you could go to any 20-year span and say this is the artist span and collectively pick out 10 great artists. Or you could go to any 20-year span and collectively. I think I just feel it feels like cherry picking to me. Here's the only thing I'd say as we connect it back to investing You look at all those charts of the S&P 500 that have the doom and gloom that happens every 3 years, and someone saying, "Oh, this is horrible. This crisis, that crisis, the other crisis." Generally, stocks still go up. So don't let this inform your investing decisions. Is all I would say.
Well, I was going to say this in a different way.
Okay.
Where I tie it back to investing is something that you brought up a bunch, where if you look at when your investment generation was around, like when you were up and coming, it influences the way that you then do investing later on. And you could see that generally coming in cycles. A difference here is that this is saying that if you were raised a certain way, you'll likely raise your children a certain way, which is not the way you were raised. Like
But
generally, it says that it
yeah,
skips a generation.
and I
Whereas I
agree
think
with
in
all that.
yeah,
That's
in
great.
investing though, investing you actually might teach your kids to invest the way that you invested. I think that might be a little bit different there. But let's take kids out of this. If you just take someone's lifetime of investing, they're going to be highly influenced by what the investing landscape was like, probably between 25 and 45, right? Or whatever that period is
Mhm.
of the market. And that will then influence later on. So I can bring it back to investing there. The other cherry picking, other thing that made me just completely tie into this is when I was like, okay, so what generation would I be? And I went, I guess technically it's in that nomad, and I see like resilient, independent. I went, yeah, but also I could squint and be like, no, I'm a hero. And so I basically, if you summarize this up, I'm a resilient, independent hero. And that I can get behind.
All right, now I really have an issue with this book.
uh, this is one of those, we talk about investing a bunch, but then we all talk about all these tangents. And so I love that Jared was willing to send us in a tangent for us to
Well,
chit
it
chat
all
about.
ties back, man. It all, and the thing, I'm not even trying to be overly critical. I feel like they took things that are universally true, that like you lose knowledge with each generation, and that within those generations there's 4 or 5 or 3 cycles, whatever, however you break that down. I feel like those are universal truths, and then it just feels like they took it a little too far in saying the conclusions of that.
Oh, they started too far and took it too far. So like the first, I don't know how long of this book was them. It had nothing to do with even what we just discussed. It was talking about how everything in life comes in fours. And it went back to like literally the Etruscans, who are a lost like group of people back in Italy,
Oh,
like way
come
back in the
on.
day, and how like four is the magic number. And it went into Greek mythology and talked about fours. And so the power of the number four was what I talked about for quite a while before it even got to the turning. So it started too far, is all I'm saying. And next time I go to the doctor, I'm gonna make them check my speculum because something might be up with that. All right.
Right.
Shall we
I got
transition?
Yeah, I got 3 quick hits. Promise they're
Okay.
quick, and then I
Okay.
think you have something meaty for us. Okay, first is you last week, right after we recorded the show, had an issue with Google's AI, and this makes me so happy.
Yes, it did. It was the first time I saw it. I hadn't seen it before then. And I was trying to
It
buy, I was
says
trying to buy some kicks.
it says to convert US shoe size to European size, add 31 to the US size, and then it says I can't even do it. It gives some examples where it does the math wrong. Like,
Yes,
can't
I
even
was
do it.
so in here, this is a playful example of it being wrong because I'm just trying to buy shoes. But I just wanted the answer and I got more confused by
Yeah,
the
yeah.
answer the AI gave me. I was less capable of buying this pair of European sneakers after Google AI came into play.
Well, I've always wondered the exact logic, and then I'm more confused now as well because I think as you move up, you don't actually add a fixed
No,
number.
it's not that clean.
Like,
No, the right way for them to have done this, but it probably would have sounded like not AI enough, would just have been to give me a table.
put a chart,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
it.
what all the shoe websites do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I needed instead of this. And I was like, oh, I'm learning the theory now, which is incorrect apparently when you apply it immediately.
Okay. Um, I came across this. This is from it's a Wall Street Journal article from February actually about
Oh,
Salesforce.
okay.
And it's
Oh,
called the title of the article is Mark Benninghoff's Salesforce. It's one big family until trouble hits. There's just a line that I cannot believe, and I'm just so sorry I missed it. I have to share it with the listeners. says, in the past, the company didn't closely track how many deals each salesperson made, former employees say. More recently, managers have been diving into spreadsheets, analyzing metrics, and scrutinizing the number of deals that the salesperson closed during the quarter. If only, Douglas, if only there was like a sales tool that could help track these metrics, it'd be game changing, right?
Someone needs to tell Benioff about this innovation. That is
I
mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
but I see this all over the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
I'm guilty of this. In my business, the things that I say are table stakes for my clients. Sometimes I don't have personally because I have expertise to get around it. Like, like it is kind of human nature, but the fact that that sentence can appear in a Wall Street Journal article about the world's biggest CRM tool at a company called Salesforce is mind blowing.
Something similar happened to me. This was maybe year and a half ago. I was talking to someone from Microsoft about how they run a certain group. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And they were just giving me detail about it. And I was like, oh, how do you end up managing the communication and like the social connections between them? And they were like, well, they either built out this like custom tool or they use this third-party software for it. And I went, just to be clear, what I'm asking Microsoft, the organization that owns LinkedIn, is how you manage connections and communication between different groups, and you use not LinkedIn.
And your answer is not LinkedIn.
Yes. And she was like, yes, definitively not LinkedIn. It's like, it's
amazing. My third quick hit is
please do the one I think you're going to do. Please.
I don't know if I'm going to disappoint or not, but the
Ugh.
Biden administration said the free tax prep tool is going to all 50 states. It was only in like 13 states this year. And Intuit, who owns, what's the
TurboTax, yeah.
Their stock got hit. I think this is awesome because why not? We should have free tax prep. So I'm on my soapbox there, and props.
I actually can't believe that you didn't bring up the quick hit that I was just anticipating that you were going to,
Okay,
which is your boy. Your boy is becoming unruly again. Your boy Chamath. You sent this over to me this week.
I was trying to have a peaceful day,
But Chamath 4 years ago had a series of tweets where he was, if you have it in front of you, you can do this verbatim. I don't have it in front of me. But in the series of tweets, he was basically like, Democrats, Democrats, Democrats. I'll do what I can for the Democratic Party. AOC all the way. Love the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Fast forward, he's co-hosting a fundraising dinner for DJT.
I'm going to surprise you on this. Now I'm going to trash Chamath shortly. Actually, I'm not. But I like to see people maybe not switch political party, but I like to see people with an open mind. I like to see people that when they fill out their ballot, maybe vote on both sides of the aisle. I think that shows an ability to say I was wrong about something in the past, which can be good. I'm not going to criticize or even talk about anyone's choice of political party or candidate.
Yep.
So I like that. Do you see his interview on the San Francisco business show with the Bay Bridge in the background where he's pumping up Musk recently?
No, I have not.
Well, so the behind the scenes on Chamath, listen, for the record, I did not talk about this.
You are talking about it.
Is that he was forced to sell his private jet, that he's like there's some financial challenges, which would make sense given the performance of his SPACs and some other things, right? So I don't know why I find this so funny. And I've told you before, if I'm ever worth like $500 million, I want you to tell me to go away, not have a public persona, not talk about wealth, just go away and spend time with friends and family. That's what I want to do. I chuckled so hard because in defending Musk and his leadership style, which I think is reasonable, he talked about the new Model 3 he just bought and how great of a car it is. And the only thing that I'm still laughing about this is a guy that just sold his private jet. Like, this is a guy that I'm sure 5 years ago is driving $200,000 to $300,000 cars. And now he has like basically the new Toyota Camry, especially for Silicon Valley. This is like the Toyota Camry. And that's awesome. Good for him. I'm sure it's a great car, but I just cannot stop chuckling about it. He bought a Toyota Camry and he's bragging about it.
It's a wonderful vehicle. Anything else that's about to come out of my mouth will not be favorable. So
Well, for the record, I tried not to talk about this.
I know.
Props. Cheers to you, Chamath. Hope you have a great month, year, decade. Let's go.
There we go. All right, I'm a transition. Reaching the fishbowl. This was one of the most this is one of the articles that got me most thinking this week. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the graphs. Loving it, loving it. It's in the Washington Post, people. Do you know YouGov?
I think so. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, they do a bunch of polls and whatnot. They got the survey skills, and I think they come up with some interesting things sometimes. So this is the result. The Washington Post article is summarizing some results from a YouGov survey that was did. And simple questions, or at least concepts. I don't know what the exact questions were, but simple concepts they raised here. The first was, what's your favorite decade? They asked about 2,000 adults. What decade had the best and worst music, movies, economy, like that kind of stuff? It starts off with something that is fine. I think it's not all that thought provoking. People have very different views. There was nothing that spiked on what the best decade is. So the question they asked, they went, what's the best decade? They did not get their answer. They then broke this down a couple different ways. They looked at it by political affiliation. It wasn't particularly surprising how things came out. Republicans said that the best decades for things were when Republicans were president. Democrats said the best decades when Democrats. Like, it wasn't anything too interesting. Then my friend, what they did was they broke it out by time you were born. And then it started to get a little bit interesting. Like, by age group, there were specific decades when things spiked. Okay, that's interesting. You got your best movies in this decade. Then it got even more interesting. And this was by category. There were different ages when by category, there were different ages when that category would peak. And I thought that this was pretty cool. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Actually, are you looking at it right now? Say no.
No.
Okay. I'm going to quiz you. I'm turning to a little quiz then.
Yes.
At what age on average, so was the most common answer for the best economy? How old were the people when they said the economy was the best?
25.
12.
Oh, that's actually great because you're a kid, you don't know it better. Who's the comedian that says the reason you thought you thought life was great when you were a kid is because you were a child? Who's that?
Yes.
It's like Chris Rock or somebody. Like,
yeah,
it might be
exactly
Chappelle.
Right. Exactly right. So when there was one of the questions that was, when was your community most close knit? And the common age there was when people were between 4 and 7 years old. That's when they said, and it wasn't, again, I'm going to go back. This was not asking how old were they when they felt this way. It was by chance the time period that they said when the US had the most close-knit communities happened to be when they were 4 to 7 years old.
Yeah. So if I'm born in 1960, I go, oh, I remember 1965 so fondly.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, because you were a 5-year-old and you had no clue who was at war, who wasn't paying the bills.
That's exactly right. The happiest families, the most moral society, and the most reliable news came ages 8 to 11. It's very similar. You don't know any better. This is when, like, your parents know everything, right? That is so, everything is, you're learning everything new. Everything's so reliable. Every fact that you hear is true at that point in time. The best economy, as well as best radio, television, movies, happened in the early teens, 12 to 15 years old.
I got to interrupt here because what happened to me this week is my 11-year-old asked me if he could download a compound interest calculator. Man, was that a special day in this house, Dougals. Did you get the joke? Did you get the joke?
No.
You don't. He's already thinking about growing wealth.
Oh, no, I got that's not a joke, though. What's the joke?
Yeah.
I got the point. I didn't get
the joke.
The joke
is that I care about it. Most people don't care about it.
Meanwhile,
most kids don't care about it.
I'm not there yet. So my wife texted me yesterday, and my son goes to a tutor every Friday, and he was at the tutor, and she said, I think you have some work to do because I'm hearing describe what the stock market is right now, and it is just not accurate. So we come back, and I was like, what did he say? And apparently he was asked about the stock market. He goes, oh, you know about the euro and the USD is how he described the stock market. So, but most people don't know about foreign currency exchange. So it might be more advanced.
Good. That means he's well traveled. I love
potentially. All right. The last couple things here. Some like higher priced stuff like fashion, music, sporting events, that peaks in the late teens. So all this starts to make sense. This last thing right here is where the psychological thriller, I'm turning around with the darkness in the horror movie, got clubbed up against the jawline came in. They then said, what's the worst decade for? The same things. So if we go back to the beginning of when I was talking here, I said when they asked what the best decade was, it was kind of all over the place. So then they did all this other analysis to figure it out. When they asked what's the worst decade for all those categories, the most popular answer across every category was right now. And and this goes back, like when we're talking decades, you know what a decade is? 10-year period. When we're talking about decades, this went back to the 1930s to present because they were asking people across a lot of different generations. So what was the worst decade for the economy? Right now got lower scores than the Great Depression.
Isn't the human brain just the most incredible thing and an absolute piece of garbage when it comes to our biases? And this goes back to Jared's listener mail, like the things we forget because they aren't at the forefront of our mind, or because the generation who told those stories about the Great Depression isn't really around right now. I mean, how?
At least the Great Depression got second. So like the 19, but still, yeah, I don't know. There is we'll put this on the Substack on Monday, skippydougals.substack.com, what I'm about to mention. There is this, I thought, interesting Jason Swag article this past week called What Our Brains Know About Stocks But Won't Tell Us. And it's going back to how the human brain works is an interesting one. We'll throw it on the Substack so you can read that. Don't need to cover that one right now. But the human brain is fascinating. Right now, you're talking a period where we have low historical unemployment. Inflation's really not that bad right now. Stock market, not a part of the economy, but stock market at all-time highs. You've got all the things that we've just discussed. Now, you know me, I also got all my like red flags everywhere, but for people to even have that in the same conversation as the 1930s, the grapes of wrath.
You know how it's not even to talk politics, but to talk psychology and how the human brain works. You know how it's really difficult for a president to get elected to a second term because of this, because everyone says right now isn't that great. I think the solution here is just to allow 10-year-olds to vote, because they're all going to be like, this is great.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful.
And me and my buddies down at the park, I want some more of this.
Yes. If you have the incumbent president in your party, 10-year-olds that are affiliated with that party can vote.
So
the
good.
challenging party.
So good.
Yeah. I thought it was quite interesting. I love this like human psychology. It like scares me sometimes because it's confounding. Like it's absolutely confounding to me.
You missed the one that I thought you were going to talk about. When do people say music is the best?
Late teens? Was it something like that?
See, I just saw the charts briefly. I thought it was like early 20s.
No, it's like 16.
Okay, 16.
Roughly.
So
yeah.
What is there anything that's like 20s and 30s that peaks?
No, apparently not, according to, at least not in the categories that it seems like they asked here.
Wow. So we all just, are living our teenage years over and over again?
Yeah, I would. Like, if I think back over my life, it's actually probably pretty similar. Like, if somebody said, music-wise, if somebody came to me and said, give me your top 10 like songs that you'd want to hear, right, for the rest of your life, or what you think the top 10 songs, they're going to come from that period of probably when I was 15 to 20 years old.
I have an approach to try and balance this when I know my brain is fooling me that I think is pretty good. I want your take on it. When I'm trying to make a long-term decision, I'm trying to guard against this hypothetical example of getting a tattoo at 16 that you regret for the rest of your life, right? Because life moves on. So I use this like when I'm buying a car, potentially when I'm buying a house, when I'm making these big decisions that I want to stand the test of time. I try and think about the things that I have liked for decades that are usually many decades old. So like the type of house I like, is not the brand new modern thing, or
Yep.
the type of house I would try to buy
Yep.
is not the
Yep.
brand new modern thing. It's the thing that I feel like stood the test of time over the last 80 years. Is that a reasonable approach to, like, what are some tricks here to help us understand when our brain is fooling us this way?
Listen and look for different perspectives. I think it's that simple.
That's fair.
If you
Pretty
just listen to
broad,
yourself,
Dougals. I
I
mean,
know,
it's
but
pretty broad.
if you just listen to yourself, you're going to fool yourself because humans naturally do things in their worst interest. If you only listen to people who have your experience, have your perspective, you're just going to double down on
Yeah.
those same things. So just listen and look for stuff from different perspectives. I think that's kind of it. That's why it allowed me, I'm telling you right now, that's why it allowed me freshman year in college to go into someone else's dorm room and they played Sweet Child of Mine.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the beginning, I didn't listen to this music, this guitar string music. I went into this room being like, this person talk about some guns and you're mixing those with flowers. I don't even understand how you're gonna mix the guns with flowers.
What is happening right now?
Yeah, what is happening? But I sat down and those first few bars, Sweet Child of Mine, opened my entire world. That's a small, silly example, but it made it so that like when people brought up other types of music like that in the future, I was like, oh yeah, like let me this what are these doors, right? I don't know why you're named after like this threshold holder in my home, but I'm gonna listen to this band, The Doors. Like it made it so that I could now listen to other stuff. If you take that and extrapolate that into more important things in life, listen to the person that's like, maybe the economy is not as bad as you think it might be right now. Maybe that person from the other side of the aisle, like some of what they're saying might be true. Think about the opposite of your story. This is important stuff.
Here's my follow-up question. This would be complete speculation, but I want your take. So, because our teenage years are so formative, if an individual lives I'd call it a very sheltered life through that period of time, it's probably much tougher to be more open to new ideas when you're 50 if you were really sheltered in your teens and
Yeah.
early 20s.
It's scary. Yeah.
So is that the point where maybe like a parent should say, I want them exposed to as many diverse experiences as possible within reason?
Yeah, I think so. My philosophy on school, this is a loose, raise your kids however you want to raise them. My philosophy on school, though, is I believe that as much as is feasible for you as a parent, you should try and send your child to a school that gives them a different experience than they get at home.
Mm-hmm.
So if at home you have, like, I don't know, you're like a C-level exec and you've got a bunch of friends that are C-level executives and whatnot, do not send your child to the elite private
The
school.
C-level exec
Exactly.
school, which
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
But if at home that's not your lifestyle, and maybe the people in your neighborhood are the people that your child has access to, like what their jobs are and what their careers could be, send them to whatever the best school that you can that has the folks where they have different views that they could have. And that's not always possible, but if you can, I think that's worthwhile. There's this one last book recommendation I'm gonna throw out here. This book is called The Good Life, and it's written by a couple folks. I don't know if they're from Harvard, but they based this off of this Harvard study, this longitudinal study that was started many like 100 years ago. And what
Really
it did
famous.
was and so it would start with kids when they were like 14 years old, and then over time they would interview them every few years to see how their life was doing. They take their vitals to be able to get their biology. Then they started interviewing their kids, and it's just fascinating going to seeing people how they grew up when you have the entire life of the choices that they've made, what their chemistry looked like. Absolutely fascinating. And the number one indicator of someone having, according to the study in this book, someone having a good life was the strength of relationships, by far. So this raised for me because you talked about being sheltered, which isn't exactly the same as relationships, but related.
Love it. We were all over the place today.
Ooh, yeah, we were Speedy Gonzalez / William Shatner.
Anything else in your fishbowl?
That's it.
Hit skippydoogles.com. All thanks Skippy Doogles. As you know, there's like premium subscriptions, Substack. We got it all at this point. So dive into that if you want. If not, we'll see you next week.
See you.